welcome to the channel. I'm Summer. Today's haircut tutorial, we are taking on one of the trending haircuts this year, the fairy cut. It is essentially a lot of layers, a lot of texture. We've got a fringe with it. We've got a little bit of disconnect with the layers, but I'm gonna show you exactly the proper sectioning to take to get the max movement while keeping length and thickness, how to make a disconnected layer, but it blend at the same time, all that and more. So with that being said, let's get started. All right, so we are gonna get started with our fun layered trending cut. This is very similar to other previous cuts. It reminds me of the butterfly, but with more layers and a much more face frame and sort of like a bang feel to it than a butterfly cut is a little bit more like lived in and long and flowy, where this has a little bit more texture and layers all over. So I slightly have her sectioned off already. We just have it split at right at the tip, barely behind the ear here. It is at the slightest angle, and all that hair is coming forward. We've done that on both sides. And then this is a middle part. It can be cut on the side. However, I feel like the way that it's intended to look right now, it is down the middle. You could change it, but like a butterfly, the fairy cut I feel like is meant to be down the middle. And then for right now in the back, I just have this braided. It's out of my way. We're gonna be cutting this last. So we're starting in the front. And we're gonna be doing 3 sections in the front to cut our hair. We're gonna be doing basically a mohawk in the middle that's gonna set our bangs. And then we're gonna incorporate the sides in to create that face frame. So what I'm gonna do for our quote unquote bang section, typically with bangs, when I take my parting, I come to be right at the edge of the eyebrow. Well, for creating our bang section, I wanna be more so closer to where the arch is. If somebody has an arch or where the eyebrow curves, I wanna be on the inside of that line, which I'll explain that as we go through the video as to why that is. But I just wanna be slightly on the inside. For starters, it's going to create a little bit of a disconnect for the fringe to kind of like pop out and go into the rest of the face frame. It will blend, but it is gonna be slightly disconnected. So also another good guideline is if you're unsure of where to do it, you're gonna be sort of in that recession area. So if you're looking at me, this is my arch here. And if I come directly up, underneath it is my recession. So you can also use that as a guide as well. So I'm gonna I gotta block the camera for a second. Take a look. I'm gonna just be right here and I'm gonna go just straight back first with it to get my section. You can see that. I'm gonna grab all this hair and then we're gonna do the same on this other side and go straight back. So I'm gonna first take a look at this. And again, I did this with a little foiling comb. You can do it with a regular comb or clip, whatever works best. So I'm a little off base here. I need to even this out. She is thicker on this side, which it's fine. Actually, that's pretty accurate to most people's hair type. You're usually thicker on one side over the other, but I'm just gonna even this out a little bit more. So I'm gonna just come back and it's like this little hump right here that I need to take out. Just that. You want this line to be as straight as possible. So I'll show you from a side view. If we just have, I mean, obviously it curves down with the head, the way that the head is shaped, but it is overall a straight line. It's not like lower on one side, higher on the other. And then we're gonna check that and make sure it looks good to the other side. And I'm happy with that. So I'm on the inside of the edge of that eyebrow, right in line sort of with the arch and the recession. So we're right on the inside. We have a little bit of an edge there. Hopefully you can see that. And if you were worried you could come in a little bit, I am just gonna barely come in on that. So inside the edge of the eyebrow, close to that arch, in sort of almost in front of the recession, give or take how your recession is. And then this is gonna get clipped up out of the way. Well, we're actually gonna cut this first, but I'm clipping it to just show you guys. And then you have your side sections that you will actually clip this back because we're gonna cut the front first and then the sides. So what essentially we'll be doing, we're gonna be cutting our guide first, and it's sort of gonna like flip out over what the rest of this face frame is. So this is going to remain a little bit longer than what we cut our guide as. But when this bang falls, like I said, we're still gonna be on the inside of the edge of the eyebrow. Okay, so with this cut, I do break this cut down as well as some other popular trending cuts right now on my other channel, Summer Beauty, where I go through what all the popular trending cuts are. I'm gonna be doing a series of haircuts on them here, but on my Summer Beauty channel, I go a little bit more in depth on your face shapes, how to determine your face shapes, and then I break down each cut with what looks good about the cut per face shape or how to tweak it to make your face shape stand out the most. So I will leave that linked below, and then like I said, we're gonna be doing a series of all those cuts, but you'll be able to find out a little bit more information on how this cut works for each face shape that there is. So make sure you check that out. So this whole section is going to be what we cut into our fringe, and it's going to be setting the guide for our back layers that we'll address later. So you want to determine with your client or yourself, where do you want to see your shorter pieces? I'm going to be doing this right at the nose here, so we have a good swoop, and then depending on how it lays, I might in the center of this, after it's dry, cut a little bit more if we need to, but we'll see. I'm hoping that we don't, because right at that nose, this is gonna bounce a little and split, but if we need to take it shorter, we can. So we're gonna obviously be cutting in sections. We are not grabbing this and cutting all in one swoop. We don't do that here. We work in sections so we get nice, clean haircuts. And you're just gonna clip the rest back out of the way. So I'm gonna come in with my scissors, and we're gonna be cutting in horizontal sectioning. So everything is gonna come down. It's a straight horizontal line. We're not gonna be coming in, you know, vertically or anything like that, just straight horizontal, pretty basic cut, almost as if you're cutting someone's perimeter. We are slightly off of the face, just ever so slightly with our position. So I'm not gonna bring it right smack down to her nose. We're gonna have it elevated just ever so slightly. And I will be point cutting because this is meant to be a lived-in textured haircut. I don't want any blunt lines. So I'm right at the nose, and we're just gonna point cut. And take a look at that. This is falling just under the tip. So again, I've talked about this in a previous blow dry video for bangs. Bangs will shrink up when you go to dry them. The smaller the brush you use to dry them, the more bounce and bend you can get in your bang, which will also make them look shorter. So we're gonna come into our next section. You want it small enough to be able to see that guide. And for all of this section, everything is gonna be coming forward to this bang guide that we've cut to create our bang in the front, as well as what will be the guide for our layers in the back. And we're gonna be point cutting everything. And then if you want, you could break this into a couple spots so you get maximum control to see through your guide. You don't have to do it all in one pull with your hands. And I'm pulling straight down. I'm trying to not direct it over to me. I want it to stay within basically the line of your section. So keep that in mind. Try to keep it, granted, if I'm cutting in the salon or you're cutting on yourself, you have a little bit more control. And in the salon, I would stand directly in front. So I have to watch out for that. But doing this on somebody else, rather than me standing off to an angle, is easier to keep that where you're inside the line. So just be aware of that. And then to show you how big my section is that I'm taking at a time, we're just coming in. It's about 1/2 inch, I would say. You know, I'll be able to easily see through to that guide. So a lot of this haircut is going to be over directing everything to one side. It's sort of like a stationary guide with how you can do that to create layers. It has that feel to it, but with a little bit more, it's like a blend of stationary layers and like a guide that moves. Which, if you are unfamiliar with that term, stationary layers versus like a traveling guide, I'll leave a video linked below. I have a haircut that I did one side of the head stationary, one side of the head traveling, so you guys get a nice visual difference. So this is my last section. Again, we're point cutting, staying within the line of our section. So it's like you don't want to color outside of the lines. You don't want to cut outside that line if possible. So now that I have that cut, I'm just going to check the length here. So I'm going to grab everything and I'm going to pull it directly in front to the center, see if there's anything we need to cut. I have this one little guy sticking out in this corner. So now that that's cut, all I'm going to do first is come in and I'm just going to point cut this to soften it up. This is a highly textured haircut, so we want to create texture. We don't want our lines to be too blunt. So I'm just going to lightly point cut at this. We are going to cut into that later too with some layers, but I do want to just soften it up a little bit. You could break this up if you wanted to as well, so you get a little bit more control. You can soften more appropriately as far as all through this whole section rather than just, you know, in one little spot. All right, so we have all that hair and it looks super thick with all this pulled to the front. This is gonna get pushed to the back. So for now, I'm just gonna flip that back out of the way because we really only need to focus on this front area for our next sections, which are going to be in the sides. And let me spritz down her bangs. They're a little dry. Okay, so now we're gonna be moving into the sides, and what we're gonna be doing is we're going to be taking, my back little braid fell out, so I'm just gonna clip this back hair out of the way so I don't grab any of it, and I'll know when I'm done with my front section here. So for the sides, we are going to be taking and over directing to the opposite brow. And I wanna explain to you guys really quick why that is. So for one, we're gonna come in and we're gonna take our sections, slight diagonals. So there's a slight angle here. It's not straight up and down. We're doing slight diagonals because we're gonna be pulling it more so diagonally across the face. And what I'll show you, what we're gonna be doing. Now, if you wanted something that was like crazy on top face framing layers, you could come and you could just come and cut this horizontally the same as we did our bangs. It's all personal preference, but what that will do, if you continue to cut this horizontally with the bang, it's gonna remove a ton of length right around the face. So if you want something that still has like, this is gonna have a lot of layers and stuff to it, but it still maintains like a slight traditional sense as far as the face frame. It comes down around the face and whatnot. But if you come and you cut this horizontally, so there is my guide, all of this length gets removed. So you still will have a short to long layer. So you're still gonna go from your short piece here and the long layer will still flow down. But your long layer, it's barely at the jaw here. So you're really gonna take away a lot of length and a lot of weight. So this cut is meant to have lots of movement and lots of shape, but you still have like the length around the face to create like a nice face frame that's a little bit more lived in rather than just coming horizontally like that. And you're like, oh, is this like a mini mullet, so to speak? So we're gonna be angling and going over the face. So we'll still be moving in these diagonal sections where it's just ever so slightly at an angle. And instead of going horizontally, we're gonna be coming and we're gonna be going over and across the face to this other point here. This is gonna be our guide. So we're coming over, trying to be able to show you guys this. Let me do it without my scissors first. We're coming over across the face. You're going to meet your guide on this other side. So over and across. Our fingers are at a slight angle because we are at a slight angle here with our sectioning. And what that does, it's still gonna go short to long, like if you were to do this horizontal, but you're gonna keep much more length around the face. So your longest piece is gonna come down just above that clavicle. And then as we go further in the head, it gets a little bit longer. But hopefully I explained that right and wasn't too long-winded for why we're doing it over and across. It's to preserve more length and have more of like a flowy feel. And when you need to spritz the hair back down, do so. You don't want the hair to be like too dry when you're cutting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna first cut a guide here just because it's sort of hard to grab it and meet our guide over there. So I'm just gonna take this first little piece and we're gonna pull it over, coming across the face here. I'm gonna grab my guide and all I'm gonna do is cut down here because I can see that. You could also, if you wanted to, instead of like holding your scissors at first, you could just comb it. Because we don't want to over direct this up. You want it to still kind of come down and over. Same with our bangs. I'm at my guide. You can then pick up your scissors and come down and cut. So all I did was I took my first guide here, I brought it over and across, and we just met up with our guide over here. So it flows in. So you can see that a little bit better. Over and across, meet your guide over here. So that can be the guide now for the rest of your section because it is a little hard, especially if you're new, to get it over and across the way, especially then pair it with trying to not block a camera. It can be challenging. So we're gonna take the rest of our section. We have cut this guide, but we're still gonna direct over. I'm gonna let out some of this because it's too much to hold all in my hands. And we're just gonna cut right down into this. And you're just gonna follow your guide. Bring it back to the same point. You're at the edge of that eyebrow where that other guide is, and cut. So you can see how long that leaves it. Well, we cut all into this face and it is still slightly disconnected from our main bang here, but this is gonna swoop back really nice to have a little bit of disconnect. And if we need to blend this in later, we can, but it's meant to sort of have like a purposeful disconnect. It still will flow, but you get like that textured and that more edgy feel by having some spots a little disconnected. So I'm gonna repeat that all the way through. So we're just taking our next small diagonal guide. And now that we've already set our guide over there, it's gonna be a little bit easier. It's like the first setting of the guide that can be a little challenging, but once you have that in place, it's easier to go over and across. Okay, so we're just gonna grab our section. Doesn't have to be all in one go here, but coming over to the opposite edge of that eyebrow, and you're gonna follow your guide. And you can angle your hands just ever so slightly, your fingers. Make sure you're going all the way over, and I actually need to angle this just ever so slightly up here because I'm at the edge of my eyebrow, and that falls in line a little bit better with the guide. And then you'll just continue taking those diagonal sections just like we did before and finish out the rest of your section, and we'll move into the next one. Okay, so we have our first side section done, and we're not going to cut into it anymore right now. We're going to wait because these are going to be incorporated in later with the top to create a little bit more layering. But you can see the slight disconnect from our original bang to where it's just slightly longer. That's going to curve in nice, and if we need to cut off more later, we can, and some of it might slightly get snipped when we go to cut our layers later. So I'm going to do this other side the same way. I'm going to first spritz it down, and we're going to cut this exactly the same where we're going over and across to the opposite side, and I'm going to clip this hair from the back that fell out. And again, we're going to be taking those diagonal sections. You're not going completely vertical. You want, you know, the slightest angle with it to help when you're pulling it across to keep it nice and soft. And then again, we can choose to set our guide first. Take a little bit of this hair. Find your original guide. So make sure you remove any of these like longer pieces. So we've combed this over. Angle those fingers down to match the angle of your section, and you just cut up into that, and now we'll blend in the rest. We're coming over and across to the edge of our brow. I'm going to angle this off ever so slightly and just blend right up into that. Was past that edge just a little bit, so I'm shortening this up. So if you want to be able, after you set your guide, go ahead and clip the hair out of the way on this other side so you can see that edge. So that last piece I just cut, originally I went a little bit past, so that's why I shortened it up a tiny bit more. And come in, take our next section, same diagonal. And we're going to just do the same steps through this side, and then we will move into cutting our back layers. I see my guide in here. Actually, there we go. Alrighty, so we have our sides done, and you could opt to check your sides right now first if you wanted to. before you move into the back layers. But because these are gonna get layered later, I'm not so worried about it right now because that'll change the shape anyways. So everything will get blended and matched up. But if you wanted to check, you could. I have actually a tiny bit of length here, a little bit of length left on the other side. So I will check that just to show you guys. But otherwise you still could wait if you wanted to. So all we're gonna do is bring this over. And in here is probably where that starts. Yep. And when all else fails, we can just nip it right here. And just, I can see it right there. So that was our base length. And just right in that middle. And we're good to go. So now we're gonna move into the sides, to the back. We already did the sides. I'm gonna clip the sides though out of the way because I don't wanna touch them. I want them in no way, shape, or form getting cut. So I've got those clipped and we're gonna re-spritz this top as it has dried out on us. You definitely wanna make sure you are cutting the hair where it's evenly damp everywhere. If it's too dried out in one spot and then like soaking wet in another, you're not gonna get, the hair is gonna be uneven. So like where the hair is dry, it's now technically a little shorter because when hair is wet, it stretches. When it's dry, it shrinks. So that's why you wanna keep even saturation all throughout the hair. So to blend in our back, we're gonna do it sort of similar to like traditional layers. We're gonna start, let me take this up. We are gonna just start by going with a traditional sort of in the middle section like I do with other layers. This is gonna get combed forward. You could opt to clip this other hair if you wanted to, but we're just gonna comb it forward. So what we're gonna do to blend in these backs, what I'm gonna take a look at is how this front section that got cut as a bang, how that is looking when I go and lift it all up. So we did cut this horizontally, but now I'm gonna be moving the back in more vertical sections. So when I comb this up, you can see the natural angle that happens here because we directed everything forward. So it goes from short, these pieces in the front are gonna be shorter, the pieces in the back that got over-directed are gonna be longer. That's how stationary guide works. You're moving everything to the same spot to create your shape. So we have a nice flow and blend here. So we're gonna kind of be using that to just flow into the back. So in the back, I wanna bring this up actually a touch more because this is gonna be too long. Yeah, for how much layers this wants. So in order to do that, all I'm gonna do, let me lower her. We're just sort of gonna follow the guide that we have, but we're just gonna nick off a little bit more. Yeah, that was that piece. We're just gonna nick off a little bit more length. So as you can see, when I comb this all straight up, you can see that angle flowing. So we're just gonna skim off this longer hair that's right here. So it's still gonna be going from short to long, but I'm gonna comb up. I can see my shorter pieces in here. This is falling out. So I'm gonna use that as the guide and we're just gonna cut right into that. So that just shortens this up ever so slightly. So with this cut though, you still are gonna go in the front, shorter layers. They're still gonna be shorter in the back, but a little bit longer because we're gonna be over directing everything up. So now that we've done that, we're gonna grab from our little vertical section here and we're just gonna continue adding to it. It's very easy. The back is the easiest part, I would say, of this haircut. You're gonna work in just small sections of your vertical guide here, doing what we just did. So you're gonna lift up. I'm pulling straight out though from the section that we're in. So let me show you guys. So we're in this vertical section and I'm pulling it out so the head starts curving here. I don't want to over direct it up too much. I'm just pulling it straight out and we're just going to blend in. So you won't need all this hair in the front, but come in. We're angling up. My shorter piece is right here and we're just cutting right into that. And as I move down to the bottom part of that section, I'm coming out a little bit with it more to just create a little bit more shape. But that's gonna flow really nice into the base. So we're gonna grab a little bit more hair here. Same thing, we're just coming out. You're gonna find your previous guide. So I've got my section is right here and my guide is here. So let me do that. Here's my guide, here's my long hair, cut. Grab the rest of this hair. We're combing out and I'm just twisting to find my previous guide, and usually it's sort of down at the bottom. You're not gonna maybe blend in quite the same. Got some rogue hairs here. Let me stand behind. I'm coming out, yeah, from this angle I can see it a little bit better. There we go. So all of this just slightly cut. And come all the way down to that bottom section, and we have just a little bit of length there to cut. So we're just gonna continue rotating through the hair in these back layers. We're not gonna be bringing everything to the center though. We're gonna be rounding with the head and like pie shapes, but everything's just gonna get brought up and over to the guide that's in front of you. So we're combing up, I'm coming sort of out from my section here. I can see my guide, cut. And you can drop the hair in front as you go. So this cut goes from a lot of short to long is sort of the premise of this cut. So you get a lot of shape through the top, but you still have your length. And if we need to remove more length at the end, we can. I will say this cut does work best on a mid-length. If it's too long, you just sort of, because it has a lot of layers, you end up looking maybe a little bit more thin. So if you like a wispy look, it's fine to leave the length, but if you want a more thicker full through your ends, you might need to bring it up, which we will probably do with this because this hair is a little bit more of a medium density. It's not super crazy thick. So if you have a lot of hair, feel free to not worry about cutting the length, but if you're somebody with more medium density and you want it to look as thick and full as possible, you're gonna need to wear it mid-length, which is maybe just slightly longer than mine. So you'll just continue doing this, pulling up and meeting that guide. So while we are layering all down through the length, you still are keeping it, but like I said, we might have to lift this a little bit just to keep those ends more full. So I'm just gonna do the same thing through the rest of this other side, and then we will move into how we're gonna blend in our side layers to the top. right, so as you can see, it's still long. I can tell when we go to dry this that it's gonna look a little too sparse here at the ends because of all the layering. So I am gonna nip the length really quickly, just in the back, not a lot. The sides will blend in, but this is definitely a cut. So if you're a stylist, you need to talk with your client about the importance of how long or short to keep the perimeter, the length to look as thick and full as possible. Like I said, this is meant to have a lot of layers. I talk about this a little bit more in my video on summer beauty, but it is best as a mid-length cut because you maintain more thickness through the end. So we're just gonna come across and I'm just gonna take up, not a ton, just a very little bit. It'll sort of basically meet that bottom, more bottom layer and shorten this. And I'm still gonna lightly point cut at it because it is meant to be soft. I don't want it to be blunt, but it will help to maintain a more full look through those ends. And I might not have anything to cut here. And no, I don't. So that'll just keep it a little bit more full. And it didn't really interact with like a disconnect from the layers back here. All right, perfect. So we're gonna move into the sides. And the sides, we do it slightly similar to the back. Let's spritz them down first. So we're gonna cut our layers first, and all we're gonna do, very similar to the back layers, we're gonna be bringing everything up and just slightly angling. So you're gonna let all this perimeter fall and just layer this very middle section. It's not a lot at all, but it'll help just kind of lightly break that up around the face to add more movement. So we're taking a vertical section and we're combing all of this up. And you're gonna angle up, same as you did the back, and you can see your guide, your baseline, I should say, the perimeter will drop out, but you're gonna see this guide from your technically bang section you did, and you're just gonna connect the two. And if you want, when you're done, you can lightly point cut it to soften it up. So I'm gonna do this on both sides. And in that very front, you won't most likely have anything to cut. So vertical section. We're gonna come up and twist. This whole bottom falls out, and you're just cutting that top that's gonna blend right in with your original guide. All that falls. Again, in the very, very front, we don't have, we have one little rogue guy right there. So all now we have left to do is to blend in the sides to the back, and she is drying like crazy. So I'm gonna spritz her for what will be the last time. So all you're gonna do, because again, the sides are always gonna be a little bit shorter than the back with these types of cuts. So you do have to blend them in. We have just a little bit of a disconnect right there. So in order to not make it look too, you know, mullety, all you're gonna do is connect it. So you could work it like you would a traditional face frame where you just grab this, we're gonna comb it forward, and all you're gonna do is meet that in the middle. So I have my guide right here, and the length in the back right there, and you're just essentially cutting off this little corner to blend. It's very, very easy. Take off a little bit more right there when you grab more hair from the back. Yep. And that's gonna flow in. Really nice. So you have that flow similar to a butterfly, but we have a lot more layers all through the back. So I'm gonna match that on this side first. Your guide is there, and just angle right into it. And this will be our last piece. So all I want to do right now is you would have your client take a look at the bangs. Now, I feel like they're a little bit long, but personal preference, you know, somebody might want them a little bit heavier. All I'm going to do is just right in the center here. They kind of parted themselves. I'm just going to shorten this up just a tiny bit and angle it in, sort of like bottleneck bangs, just so we have a little bit more separation, and this center can be out of the eye, and then these are going to flow out around it. So it's just the very center, sort of right in the middle of where the part is. And all we're going to do is I've combed this flat. We're going to twist it. You're going to twist it twice. And then all we're going to do is point cut right there to make it just a little bit softer. And then I'm just going to lightly with my texturizing shears just barely soften that center up so it's nice and wispy, and it's going to separate really well. So I'm going to go ahead and get her dry, and then we'll show you guys what it looks like if we need to do any dry cutting, and we'll go from there. All right, so I've got her blown out, and look at all these layers. I love it. So we do need to do some dry cutting. I feel like she is, what side am I looking at? Just a little off on the sides. Yeah, there we go. This side is just a tiny bit longer, and we need to do a little bit more texturizing. Texturizing is like hit or miss. People either love it or they hate it. It is required though. While you do want some weight in the haircut to be able to show, you know, the layers off, you still need to sometimes texturize them to soften them, especially just in the front, just like a tiny, tiny bit. But we first need to just clean up our sides. This is a little bit longer on the one side. I am gonna leave a blow dry tutorial linked in the description. I'm going to film, I didn't film it for you guys here, but I'm gonna film a blow dry kind of comparison. So blowing this haircut out with a round brush and blow dryer, so like the traditional stylist way with my two tools, or with a blowout brush. So for stylists watching, you get the stylist version, and if you also use the blowout brush as a stylist or you're at home, you're gonna get to see how to get a lot of bend, movement, and layers with a good comparison. So now that I've told you that, let's get into our cleaning up. It's not a lot. We have just, I think it's a little bit longer on the one side, so we're gonna check it, and yep, you can see that there. So what I'm gonna do first is just pull these together, and all I'm gonna do is cut that excess length, just point cutting into it, and now I'm gonna come around and I'm gonna check it on this other side here to see if we need to blend in more to the back section. So we're just gonna comb this forward, and it looks actually fine to me, but I'm just gonna soften that up, maybe just right here in this middle actually. Yeah, just that middle point just barely needs it. And then let's check. I think I need to bring it down in the back a little bit more too. So we're at our side position now. Just a tiny bit. Again, we trimmed these ends back here so we could keep it looking more full. Yeah, and I can see just barely right in here. So we're just gonna come to this middle point, and I'm just gonna clean up this little corner. So you could have opted to cut the length after you got it dry. You know, if you're somebody who's really concerned about keeping as much length as possible, you might want to cut the perimeter dry just so you can see, like, you know, if you wanted to keep excess length. But if you're somebody who is not so concerned with the length and you're like, I just want to get it cut so it looks as full as possible, I would have the stylist cut it wet, or you could cut it wet on your own at home and then trim up as needed afterwards. but we have so much layers. Look at how many layers. So we do need to texturize these top layers just a little bit. I like how heavy they are. And again, if you really wanted to swoop this up more, you can get the swoop through the ends, but these top layers are just a little too heavy for how like layered this is, because this is naturally going to take away more weight the further down the head you go. So the top is going to remain like more thick and full, but the further down the head you go, this gets a little bit more just naturally like thinned out with the layers. So usually these top ones, you really need to come in and texturize them. So you could do it point cutting. So if you're somebody who's like really like afraid of texturizing shears, point cutting might be good. But a texturizing shear will work great as well to just soften up the top layers. Texturizing shears don't have to be like so scary. But I get the fear if like you've ever had your hair jacked up with thinning shears, because I have been there myself and it's not fun. But when somebody knows what they're doing, they are amazing. So yeah, it's just like, I can see it on this main camera, just barely in here, not a lot, it's not crazy. It's best to go slow. You can always remove hair, you can't put it back. So just do a little at a time if you're worried about it. So I blew her out obviously straight today because I knew we would need to dry cut. But you can also like wave this haircut. There's lots of ways. I see it all the time online with more waves in it. But I wanted to do it dry so I could see and make sure everything blends. So let's take a look at our front. And I feel like we could texturize just ever so slightly, just barely around the face frame, especially if you like your face frame to be pretty like soft and flowy, you'll want to texturize the ends a little bit. If your hair is like baby fine and thin, which honestly, I don't know that this is my preferred haircut for you guys. But if it is and you rock this cut, you definitely won't need this done. But if you've got really thick hair, you probably want to just soften up the ends of your face frame, just so they kind of get a little bit more wispy. Mannequins, for whatever reason, around their hairline tend to be like super thick, so it might vary, you know, person to person, but it's more so just keeping the ends from looking like too blunt. This is like supposed to be a very like lots of movement, textured haircut, and blunt doesn't really work for texture. I'm going to do that on this side. But perfect. I'm really happy overall with how it came out. She has maybe a little bit more body than one may prefer. And like I said, you can do this curled as well, but we've got our nice bang. If you flatten these out a little bit more, they're going to be definitely more of that full feel, but you can swoop them off and then they just kind of close in. So where we left it a little disconnected with angling across our faces, you have this shorter bang and then it moves into longer and goes down. So you get a lot of movement. So you get a swoop here, a swoop there. You could swoop this back if you want, or you can tuck it in. It's very, very versatile. And then if you want to finish it off with either texture spray or texture paste, which is probably what I'm going to do, that's optional as well, that you would just spray or work through the hair to kind of like kick up and play off the layers more. So I'm going to do a little bit of that, and then I'll get you guys out of here with some slow-mo shots. All right, guys, here is our final look for our fairy layered haircut tutorial. We have so much shape and movement with those layers, lots of texture everywhere. I'm really obsessed with this cut, but through the sides, we have all that movement, Nice flow everywhere. It flows from that front bang back to the back length, and then through the back we have tons of layers as well. I really like how this came out. And then again, if you wanted to fluff it up more with a texture paste or spray, you can do that as well to add a little bit more movement and kind of grit to the haircut. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. I will link the DIY version as soon as it's available, and I will also link the blow dry tutorial for it as well, which I will link both of those right here as soon as they're ready. So in the meantime, I will leave you with this video to check out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.